Metro Exodus is the third game of the Metro series, following Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light. Developed by 4A Games and based on Dmitry Glukovsky's novels, the story continues the saga of Artyom and his survival in the nuclear, post-apocalyptic Russia. Published by Deep Silver on February 15, 2019, Metro Exodus was well received, with Metacritic scores in the 80s and reported selling 50% more copies than Last Light. It sounds like a decent game, but is it all that it's cracked up to be? We'll take a deeper dive to see if Metro Exodus is right for you. I first have to say that I've been looking at the Metro series since the original 2033 nearly a decade ago, and I've seen them do well, and I've seen the Redux remasters released as well. But even with my interest, I never got around to playing any of them. Then I decided to jump in with Exodus. The games appeared to keep getting better, so I figured the third time is the charm, right? So I approached this game not as being a fan of the series, nor knowing or understanding anything about the characters or the world. But the first thing the game did well was make me feel right at home in the world it presented. I didn't feel like I was missing out or not understanding for not being involved with the prior games, or the novels for that matter. However, from my understanding, what makes Exodus different than its predecessors is that you actually leave the metro. You come above ground for the majority of the game and explore semi-open world levels rather than just following linear metro tunnels. I can say that having an open area was a nice design, but the entire game isn't like that. There's some strange pacing where you have some shortened linear areas followed by mildly open world sections. It really makes it tough to figure out how much you should be exploring or how much you should just be pushing and moving on. And at the root, that seems to be the stumbling block Metro Exodus hits over and over. It's that middle ground mentality, where it isn't one thing or another. Or it's one thing but with a caveat of something else. Sort of like Goldilocks searching for that perfect porridge that isn't too hot or cold, Metro Exodus constantly struggles to find that just right state in everything that it does. From the get-go, this is more than a first-person shooter. In fact, I wouldn't even call it an FPS genre at all, even though it really is by technicality. It isn't a typical FPS campaign like maybe a Call of Duty or a Halo game. It has far too many RPG elements and systems in place to even be remotely considered similar. However, it isn't so fleshed out in a huge world, say like a Fallout type game either. It just sort of sits somewhere in the middle. And that's okay, don't get me wrong. I actually like the size of the game. It's not too big or small. And sometimes I'm looking for a game with enough meat on the bone for me to dig into, but I'm not necessarily looking for a large commitment, say like a Fallout or a Skyrim type game. So with it being what I would call a medium-sized game, it might just be a good fit for you. The length of the game will run you around 20 hours. You could probably finish it much quicker, in around 12 to 15 if you rush through it, or if you take your time you can stretch it to around 30. So however much you put into it is about what you're going to reap from this one. With graphics, I think the game excels with it most of the time. The designs, lighting, textures, they're all solid. They use their own proprietary game engine, and it looks good overall. I really wouldn't critique the graphics at all until it comes to some of the animations, namely the facial animations, and definitely during the speaking. The characters just look bland with bad and muted mouth movements, and they really aren't even matched to the audio. Which brings us to the sound. The sound of the game, I can't speak very highly of. While the sound design is good and helps set the tone of the game greatly, the application of the sounds was not quite as good. I did have some glitches in the game with some delays or sound cutting out, but those were few and far between, and I wouldn't say that was really a big issue. But the sound quality, the volume, and the direction, those were constantly out of balance. As an example, I would have a hard time hearing characters speak, when they were right next to me just because I was looking the other way. This was a constant occurrence, and it really killed the immersion and disrupted the gameplay quite a bit. On a technical level, I would say the sound is the worst part of the game. The music of the game helped make up for that a little bit though. Metro Exodus has a solid score. There's very enjoyable music that has some highs and lows with the songs, and it really sets the stage with the world they designed. I would on occasion even let some of the music play from the title screen or the load screens, just so I can hear the songs really get going after a few minutes. There's some pretty good music in the game, and it really fits with the world that they designed. For the gameplay, the mechanics are strong, the controls are tight, and the gunplay is top-notch in my mind. In fact, the more gunfights I got into, the more I was reminded exactly how good the guns felt. The difficulty is nothing to joke about either. I played on normal, and it was challenging. On hard, I can imagine some of the parts I struggled with being near impossible. But a lot of the struggles I had were not mechanical in nature. They were systems-based in nature, and I was just underprepared. The Metro series has an enormous amount of RPG elements in the game, and they are intense. Honestly, I'd probably say they are my favorite part of the game and my biggest takeaway from it. You don't just get to craft your guns, you get to choose how to craft your guns among a large variety of parts and choices. You can take that pistol and use it as a pistol, or you can change it into a sniper rifle. Convert your assault rifle into a shotgun. The sky is really the limit here. Oh, and don't forget to return for your upgrades. And more importantly, to clean your guns so they perform more accurately. And while you're at it, make sure to craft enough of the proper ammo to go with it, and of course some Molotovs and throwing knives for good measure. While you're at the workbench, you should take a moment to repair your mask. It will literally save your life. And make sure to craft enough filters for it, because radiation will pop up when you least expect it. And if you get stuck out without filters, you're going to have a bad day. And by that I mean, you will need to reload the chapter and start everything over. Take it from a guy who knows from experience. These are just the tidbits of the Metro Exodus systems that make everything work. And it just feels good. They didn't just throw in stuff for the sake of trying to make it complex. No, they threw stuff in that you would need. And you can tell you need it. I would say that the only drawback with all the systems they had in place was that the controls became confusing. The controls make sense, but they're complex. There's so much going on, I could never remember how to do everything. Something simple like taking out a lighter to burn spiderwebs, I'd forget. Or how I keep forgetting how to wipe the mask with a tap of the L1 button rather than holding L1. There's just a lot going on, and I don't think I ever really got the hang of it all. And if you don't use something for a while, then you kind of forget how to access it. Story-wise, I think the game is mildly complex too. Maybe not crazy, but there's clearly variables in the game affected by your playstyle. Without spoiling anything about the story, there are different possible results to the sections of the game, and the net sum of all of those results will determine the ending you get. These aspects will lend to a nice replayability of the game, as well as them having a new Game Plus feature as well. To the best of my knowledge, there are only 2 endings to the game, calling them a good and a bad ending for ease of reference. So while it might be fun to take another run at the game, after completing it with the good ending, I really don't feel compelled to. But speaking of the story, I was hoping for a bit more here. While the sound might be the biggest technical issue of the game, the story of the game is where it really all falls apart for me. The game, as well as every predecessor in the series, is based on the novels by Dmitry Glukhovsky. The fact that there are full written books on this story and characters, I sort of expected well fleshed out characters with deep relationships. But what I got was really shallow. First of all, you barely get to know the characters in the game. Yes, you can talk to them a lot of the time, but it doesn't really get you to actually know them and feel for them. Top that with the bad facial animations and voice acting that felt half-hearted, and I really didn't want to talk to them anymore. Your wife? She seems so cool and strong at first, until she speaks and basically hangs on you for everything. The characters seem like good concepts, but just shallow shells of what they probably are in the books. And then you come across new characters as you play, and you get to know them a little bit, but overall, their stories aren't really delved into very deeply. But even more so, the main protagonist of the story that you play as, you will never know well either. You play as Artyom, the star of the game and all the prior games, yet he never speaks. Go talk to 10 characters. He never speaks. His only voice is in the brief narration bits during the load screens. I think they went for a non-speaking role to make it more immersive, except that he's an existing character that you play as, not somebody you created, so it ends up being very anti-immersive, and it works against the story elements. All of these things just make me think about how the game missed the mark. They did so many things right, to only have others undo what they built up. Don't get me wrong though, I really enjoyed the game. It was seriously fun, and just a little bit different. I would actually recommend the game to anybody taking a look with some interest, but I would also warn that the game struggles with itself in determining exactly what it wants to be. Go play the game, but only do it when you can pick it up on a sale. So what did I miss? What were the elements of the game that you loved, or the ones that you hated? If you played the prior 2 games, does that affect how you feel about Exodus? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next game.